Good afternoon, good morning, and good day to everyone who's joining us today. We've got a super fabulous guest panel today. Oh, it looks like you're showing your Zoom instead of the presentation. There we go. Perfect. We apologize for being a couple minutes late, guys. We had a little bit of technical difficulties. Nothing that Visory can't handle, though. So we will jump right on into it. Guys, today we are going to be talking about the RIA Tech Gap, why so many firms struggle, and how to get it right. We have two incredible guests on with us today. We'll tell you a little bit more about them as we jump in, but we are so excited to be sharing this with you all today. All right, let's get started. First and foremost, I am your fabulous host, Claudia. I am the Inside Sales Account Manager over at Visory. So, in the event that you are looking to work with an MSP partner that specifically focuses on RIAs, I will be your gal. I'll be the one to chat with. I've also brought along Tammy. Tammy, if you want to introduce yourself.
Thank you, Claudia. I'm Tammy Jutras, the Director of Cybersecurity Services here at Visory. I've been in this role for over 11 years. I manage our Security Operations Center, where we see firsthand how controls, permissions, software stacks, and even human behavior can help us or hinder us in our security posture. So I'm excited to be on today's webinar and have the ability to share practical insights from a cybersecurity perspective.
Awesome. Thanks, Tammy. We're happy to have you on again. Guys, she has such a wealth of knowledge. I'm excited to pick her brain. Now, our first special guest today is Cameo. Cameo, please introduce yourself to the squad here.
Yes, hi everyone. It is fantastic to be here. I'm Cameo Roberson of Atlas Park Consulting. We are fractional COOs for financial advisors and wealth management teams looking to scale, get better control of their operations without burning out themselves or their teams. Have been doing this over 20 years in the financial services space. Atlas Park has been around since October of 2018, so we're approaching 7 years and having worked with over 100 clients and counting. Excited for this conversation.
Cameo, you are such a rock star. Thanks for joining us today. And then we'd have, last but certainly not least, the fabulous James, if you want to introduce yourself.
I love it. Fabulous. Thank you. I'm James Cantwell, founder of WealthTech Select and the Cantwell Advisory. We provide consulting services, wealth tech consulting, fractional CTO services to the RIA and wealth management space at large. My background is lots of operations and running operations teams. I spent years at Advent Software running their consulting, and then have been consulting independently for over 10 years now. What we really do is we do three things. We work with firms to help them reduce the amount of time that they spend on administrative and unnecessary tasks. We help them deepen their client relationships and improve the client experience, and we help them run and grow their business. And we do it primarily through leveraging tech appropriately. And we're excited. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. Thank you both so much for joining us. I know we'll have our share back on here in a second, but we want to actually first start out with reaching out to you all who are watching us. I wish I could see everyone's faces, but I cannot, unfortunately. So we'll be putting a poll up here shortly. What best describes your firm? Are you guys more advanced, looking to kind of review the tech you already have? Are you newer firms looking for insight into how to get into this space? We'll have a poll up here in a second for you to answer about this. Okay, and it looks like, gosh, today is one of those hump days that is giving us a hard time. So the poll is not going to work as we would like to. If you want to throw it in the chat, that would actually help us a lot, just so we know what we can do the best to, or how best we can answer and have this conversation today. All right. We're just waiting back on that presentation again. In the meantime, Cameo, James. Oh, I didn't even have a chance to ask you a question. I was going to say, what's your favorite story? But I'm actually going to pass it to you guys. Tell me about what you hear all the time in the space like this.
Sure. Happy to chime in here. I think one of the things that we hear all the time when it comes to technology is just tell me what I need, tell me what's the best thing. And the thing to keep in mind is that there's no such thing as the best thing. There's really the most appropriate for your specific needs. It's not about the thing with the most features. It's about the thing that you're going to get the most utilization out of, the thing that's going to be most aligned with your business and help you grow. When it comes to what research did firms do, we often hear, well, I talked to another advisor and we bought what they were using. They were happy with it. We did a demo and it looked cool. We saw it at a conference. I'm often still surprised at the limited due diligence that I see. And I think what's really kind of important to point out here is that oftentimes the uh, due diligence, the biggest piece that's missing, it's not even about the time investment. It's actually an understanding of what it is that you expect to get out of this, what you're trying to solve for first, identifying that. That's all, often missing. And then I think the last one that I'll tackle is we thought the vendor handled that, which is when it comes to compliance and security. Oftentimes they'll see some security certifications and just think that by them having those designations or certifications that they're using it in a compliant way. And just because a platform is compliant doesn't mean there isn't still work on your end to use it compliantly.
Mhm. Absolutely. And I'll chime in too. What I often hear from the advisors that I'm working with, and I'll focus specifically on the CRM, is the expectation around do we really need to build out the tool to get it to where we need it to be? And my answer is absolutely. So, expecting a CRM or any technology tool to work exactly the way you want it out of the box, yeah, we deal with that immediately because you want to make sure that you understand the tool that you're getting, but you will have to put in some work to actually build the tool out, customize it the way that you need it to, so that you get the most out of it. I often also hear, well, I want to get the same tools as my colleague, but their service model may be completely different. How they run their operations may be different. So you really want to think about how you're going to leverage the tool within your service model and within your practice that makes the most sense.
Yeah, and I'll add that, firms get into trouble when they're trying to buy tech without a clear strategy, right? Know what your goal is. And too often to talk about this last bullet, there's an assumption that security is handled by the vendor or your IT provider. When reality security is a shared responsibility, right? Firms, need to ask the right questions, verify the controls to really figure out if this is the best software product to meet their goals. And you have to be an active participant in your own compliance and the tools that are going to help you maintain that compliance. So just to kind of wrap it up, people sometimes assume that a solution that they're buying already has that security baked in mind, and that's just not always the case.
I love this, and I think there's so much nuance in it. So this is one of my favorite slides or titles of the slide, strategy before stack. I think a lot of times people can get shiny thing syndrome, if you will. Oh, this looks the most interesting or the most exciting, but really what the strategy is behind it's going to be most important. Cameo, can you give a little bit of color to this?
Yeah, happy to. So, one of the biggest things that I see advisors running to is we want the fanciest tech and we want the best automation, but no one is really taking the time to think about the strategy or your workflow processes to actually get things done. And so that's where you actually want to start with is really knowing where you're going before you build out or even purchase different technology solutions. And why is that? Because you think about if you are going to a destination, you think about maybe going on a road trip, and your final destination is New York. You're traveling from California to New York. You want to map out the different pathways that you can get to your destination as quickly as possible. If you don't take the time to map out those steps, you can find yourself taking detours and going in different directions that are more costly, more expensive than if you just took the time to think about your strategy. So oftentimes when we're working with advisors is get that clear tech roadmap understood in your practice, figure out what are the right processes you need to get to the end goal, and then align that with your firm goals and make sure that those things are in place before you go and spend a lot of money on different tech solutions. Now, Many of us, probably most of us on this call today, have been to conferences near and far, and avoiding those impulse purchases when it comes to being at the conferences, seeing the latest and greatest technology tools, those shiny bell in the window things that we all see. Those demos are great, but again, going back to strategy, if it's not in alignment, do you really need it? So think about what your strategy is before you jump in and have those impulse purchases, because mismatched tools lead to inefficiencies, lead to problems down the line. We're going to talk a little bit later around the cost of missteps and inaction when it comes to your tech stack. And then also, don't bolt on the tech, build around your processes. One of the biggest things I see with a lot of my clients is they want to throw the CRM out. It doesn't work, it's not effective. But my question is, how have you set the tool up to be as effective as it needs to be in your office? So build around your processes, figure out what you need to build within the tool before you toss it out, and then make sure your team is trained appropriately on leveraging that technology. That's how you'll get the most out of your technology suite.
Thanks so much, Cameo. Great words to live by. Tammy, I think you and I will take this on a little bit. Our favorite word, cybersecurity. So what considerations do we need to think about when we're implementing new tech?
Yeah, Claudia, I feel like a lot of RIAs I talk to, they really struggle with adopting new technology. And I think it's not because solutions don't exist, but because that buying process is often misaligned with their goals. And let's face it, a lot of these vendor websites are like a disco ball of flashy colors, right? Customer testimonials, logos of Fortune 500 companies. I see it myself, right? And that's distracting. And I think that sometimes takes away from the framework and the meat and potatoes of what you really need to be looking at. So, what I would say is when shopping for new tech or implementing new tech, work toward your end goal for business. And, have in mind that, if you misalign that tech, it's only going to cost you extra time and money if it doesn't meet your goal, right? We're going to talk a lot about that during this entire presentation today. So to talk about some of the things here that are on the slide, prioritizing your data protection, right? How is it stored? How is it encrypted, backed up? Are the logs retained? Do they provide alerting to security issues that need investigation? Who has access to those logs? If there is a threat, can you go back through that audit log? And is there enough information and details, maybe to tell you which user accessed from what IP address, right? There's nothing worse than having logs, but they're not the right logs, or they don't give you information when you need it. Things like incident response, disaster recovery, business continuity, they're all important considerations when evaluating your vendors. For example, your backup recovery option, right? Does it allow you to go back, to almost minutes before you had an issue? Or are you going to lose days of data and work, right? Is that all going to be lost? That can really make the difference when you have an incident that occurs and you need to recover data quickly, right? How much are you going to lose? And then finally, I would say, something like client portals, those are great. They can be added features for your clients, but they need to be securely implemented. That needs to be a priority, right? Is it a secure and encrypted site? Because you have to remember, a lot of times these portals are internet facing. There has to be a login, right? So if they're facing for your clients, they're also facing for bad actors and anybody that might happen upon them or tries to get into them. So I would really stress, having a checklist when assessing your vendors. That way you can compare equally across all the categories as you're looking at different vendors.
Awesome, Tammy. And I'll add on to that last point really quickly too. I'm sure I've said it on every other webinar that we've talked to, but third-party vendor due diligence. We can share a sheet that Visory does have for our clients, but it is critical in your cybersecurity while you're building out your tech stack. Who has access to what and what those employees have access to are all really important questions that you need to be asking. In fact, when I have prospects talk to me about what Visory has access to, I smile a little bit because I know that they're really taking into account the fact that every additional tool that is added into your environment is potentially posing a security risk. You got to know who you're working with.
Claudia, can I
Um,
interject real quick?
Please.
One of the, not just on tech selection, but also on implementation, thinking about your data security, one of the things to ask a lot of times, if you're doing a CRM conversion, that's probably the main one, but even something around along the lines of portfolio management, is understanding where your data is going during that conversion. Because you might be handing over a large data set or database access to the vendor, and that process by their professional services team may not follow the same guidelines that the application that you'll ultimately put your data in does. So you need to ask questions about the professional services team if you're handing over data to them or giving them access about where your data is going, how long it'll be stored, if it's secured. That's a piece that I often see get missed when people work with vendors. They just hand over their data and assume they'll be responsible with it.
Oh, what an incredible point, James. I appreciate you bringing that up. I'm curious then, in that sort of same vein, let's talk network and endpoint security, right? So beyond the implementation, beyond the physical, or I guess not physical, virtual toolkit that you're purchasing, how are we looking at devices and passwords in here?
Yeah, so I would say, your endpoints are the vehicle that you're going to be using to access the company and the client data. So like a lot of the things on this screen here, you really want to consider, where your passwords are stored. Are you using a password manager? Are people, trying to write things down or use their own, methods to remember things? Who has access, right? Is it reasonable and timely access for their role? Do they have too much access? Maybe, when you're testing, you had a lot of admin accounts, did those get sort of trued up and taken care of once you're live with the software? Which devices are connecting, right? Are they company-owned devices? Are they, phones and mobile devices? How are those secured, right? Are those devices themselves, regularly updated and patched, as well as continuous monitoring, right? Devices are not just a one-time set it and forget it, right? They're constantly evolving, and there's updates that need to happen and things like that. So you need to make sure that all of that is happening automatically, as well as, how quickly can you remove access, right? Should you need to do that? Whether it's a voluntary separation or involuntary separation, with users of your systems, you need to make sure that you can quickly remove that access. James, I think you might have some interesting examples here that you could share that you've seen in implementation.
Yeah, I would love to. And one thing that I'll just add is if you're here because you're thinking about adding new tech and you're not currently using a password manager, I'm telling you that's now your number one priority. No
Great point.
Excel, no writing things down. Unfortunately, the human is the weakest link. And if you're not using something to secure and manage your passwords across your organization, you're failing from a compliance standpoint in a pretty significant way. So definitely make that the first thing. One of the more practical things that I think I know should be utilized in implementations is limiting who has admin access. And that sounds like something that most probably think they're doing, but there's a difference between administrators who need occasional access to maybe delete a duplicate contact or update a task that needs to have something changed, like from a historical standpoint, and do something that's a little bit more sensitive, and that same person actually having a day job that requires them to use that same application. And so one of the things that I often recommend is that your admin users should each have their own username and password login. There are other ways to log in. Um, and then your single sign-on, assuming that's what you're using, should be for their everyday use. And so this can be a little bit annoying when firms charge for, a per user license fee, but it's something to maybe talk with the vendor about. during the pricing negotiations is that for your admins, you'd like them to have two accounts, one for admin use and one for everyday use if that's needed. And then have them use two different means to log in, the simple single sign-on for everyday use, the more annoying username and type in a password for their admin use. And that'll help kind of reduce accidental deletions or at least prompt them to have take a second to think before they do something that's more of their administrative role.
Yeah,
Well, it really puts
absolutely.
them in that frame of mind. I'm logging in with my super user account. I'm going to do something, pretty serious. And it also creates a great log entry, right? Should that need to be audited of what was done and who did it. So thank
Yes,
you.
and I'll add to that from an operational perspective, your day-to-day, what happens when passwords and login information resides with one or two employees, and those employees leave, and no one has access to get into the technology, let alone what that person was responsible for. There's a lot of different war stories that I've seen. So you want to think about who has access to the tech, the passwords, and make sure that there's a central place that leadership can get access to those things because people come and go, and you want to make sure that you're not locked out of certain key pieces of your tech because someone has transitioned out of your firm.
Cameo, I think that's such a good point. I've seen a little bit in the question and answer that we have some newer folks as well looking to start up their RIAs. So I think both James with the password manager and then also making sure from the get-go that you're correctly setting up user permissions is such a huge thing rather than having to go back and figure it out when you're 5, 10, 25 employees then in the future.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
All right. So let's talk a little bit about matching tech to stages. I know we have a little bit of everything. I see some partners in here. I also see some new RIAs. So how are we managing new and independent tech space versus, a merger and acquisition type firm?
Yeah, so I love this slide because it starts to really frame out that not every firm should be thinking about tech and how they're implementing it the same way. It really goes back to aligning with your actual goals and where you are and where you plan on going. And so for those new and independent firms, and it sounds like there are a number of those folks here, don't overthink your technology. I'm not saying it's not important to be thoughtful about what it is you're implementing, but when it comes to things like a note taker, when it comes to a financial planning tool, when it comes to some of these things that I'm not saying they aren't critical components, they absolutely are. But when it comes to these tools that are easy to implement, generally low cost, and usually don't lock you into lengthy contracts, you can experiment a little. It's a little bit easier to move around. It's okay to some extent. Don't go overboard to create a Frankenstack. You can kind of hobble point solutions together a little bit as you're getting started. And that's okay just to get going, right? You need to start your business. You need to run your business. Find the handful of things that are really important and start there. I always recommend using an expert like myself or Cameo, but don't overthink it. You can get started. It's just don't get comfortable and 2 or 3 years later, you're still using all that same stuff and continuing to bolt on solutions like we mentioned earlier. If you're a growing firm, this is where you need to get a lot more serious, right? You're adding advisors to your team, you're adding support staff, you really need to start thinking about your processes, and now you should have established processes. So these tools really should be supporting those processes and adapting to them. You shouldn't be adapting the other way around, right? You want your tech to support you. You don't want to have to change your process to fit into whatever the tech will support. That's an obvious sign that you're not using the right thing or it's not set up correctly. For scaling firms, they really need to start thinking about um, obviously greater security. It's important at every level, but they need to think about that a little bit more as they're hiring more people, they're dealing with more clients, they're managing more data. They need to start looking at more enterprise applications that don't have latency as they start adding lots of additional data. Um, And then the M&A stage firms, they're kind of a different animal altogether. If you're a firm that's acquiring books of business, you may be operating different brands underneath. You need to think about a different set of functionality. You're almost definitely thinking about things like data lakes, which if you're a new and independent firm, no, you don't need a data lake. Anybody else, it's a discussion. M&A stage firms, it's almost a given. Um, but now you're starting to think a lot more about being able to support those different brands. Your user administration can get a lot more complex. It needs to maybe have a lot more automation. You're definitely using SSO, and it may need to work with your existing SSO providers. So things really kind of vary as you're at a different stage. So don't overcomplicate it if you're new. If you're in that growing and scaling, I highly recommend you use an expert. And if you're an M&A stage firm, hopefully you already have a good technology team, but you could still leverage outside expertise as well.
Oh, I think that really truly breaks down the heart of what we're getting at. So let's say we've chosen our technology. Talk to me a little bit about implementation pitfalls. I feel like that's a boogie word in the space.
Yeah.
Cameo, do you want to take the first one?
Yeah, happy to.
Okay.
So implementation pitfalls. I see this all the time. There's the strategy around getting the work done, but just like the financial plan some of you might be creating for your clients, if you don't help them implement those recommendations, what happens? Nothing. And so you don't want to have a set it and forget it, doesn't work. You want to really think about that your tools are going to require ongoing updates. There really needs to be leadership buy-in. Things flow from the top down. If you're expecting your team to adopt these different technology solutions, it really needs to start with you and then flow down from you so that you can establish how this is supposed to work. Definitely make sure that you have team training in place. I just shared with a colleague recently who was having some challenges with their team is people have the technical knowledge to get things done, but they still need to understand and know how you're running your practice, and they need to know exactly how they should leverage the technology to get things done in your office. And then know that over time, as your firm grows, as James shared between growing firms and scaling firms, guess what? Your processes are going to evolve too. So have that frame of mind in place as you continue to move forward with your firm, with your tech stack, that your processes will also evolve. Because guess what? Custodians are always changing things on us, aren't they?
That's for sure. I'll put in some thoughts here. They largely align with what Cameo said. Um, it's really important that leadership is involved early and often, and that they set the example. A lot of implementations that fail are because the leadership team feels that they can behave differently than the rest of the organization, and that doesn't go unnoticed. The other thing is it really needs to be driven by them. They need to help really demonstrate and explain why you're using the tech you're using, how it's impacting the organization, how it's impacting the client experience, and really help everybody understand why it's important to get on board with these things. And if they're having challenges, get those team members the support or the training they need. Don't ignore it, right? So get involved. This is a top down sort of thing when you're implementing. Another thing, partner don't purchase. You you definitely want a technology partner or service provider that really gets to know your business. And unfortunately, that's not the business model for all of them. So make sure you have to think about your firm and what you want. So if you want that out of a vendor, that should be part of your criteria when you're evaluating. You want somebody who's really going to get to know your business. If that's not really what that type of solution does, then you need to make sure during the implementation, you're working with someone who knows the product and knows your business and can help you implement it properly. So, not every vendor wants to be a partner, and you have to figure out what heavy lifting they're going to do, how well they're going to get to know your business, and where you need to tackle it yourself and maybe find somebody to assist you. And then always go back to your original goals and make sure that you're actually getting and solving for the pain points that originally set you on this journey to find new technology.
Mhm.
And
I
I'll
think
add a little bit to James's talk about the partnership there, right? I think if you understand what is the vendor's responsibility versus what is the firm responsibility, then you can collaborate for a much more successful outcome, right? Like you said, not every application is going to be, a partner type relationship, but a lot of it is what you make of it, right? So I know for me, some of our best clients are the ones who don't necessarily dictate or delegate to us how we service their account, but we have that true partnership, right? That's a two-way street, and ideas really need to flow both ways for a successful relationship. And I would say that successful technology solutions are going to require all of the elements that are on this screen here. And, when firms understand that they're ultimately responsible for their compliance and their cybersecurity, it's not just the vendor. It really, kind of helps you see that skin in the game sort of analogy. When we were preparing for this webinar, this group really had a lot of discussion around this slide, and there was a general consensus among all of us. And I think we were all saying the same things here. We've seen technology implementations go badly, and we all bring a little bit of a different perspective to that, and how and where it goes off the rails. But I think that all of the things that you see here are things that we see over and over again, and they're really all avoidable with a little bit of pre-planning.
Cameo, I saw you jump in there at the end. I want to make sure we give you a moment as well.
Yeah, I was just going to say, how that slide really speaks to the different areas that advisors and teams need to think about. And one kind of major theme is, what does success look like for you, right? And keeping that top of mind as you go through this process with your team, with your vendors, so that you can have checkpoints to say, are we on the right track? Are we asking the right questions? Are we making the right decisions? Which helps tremendously with having to do expensive rework down the line, or getting off track, or picking technology solutions that aren't in alignment with your stage of growth. And so that's one thing that I would share, is just, what does success look like, keeping that top of mind as you go through this process.
Cameo, I
I
feel like you
love
just teed me up perfectly for this. Um,
I tried
and
to.
that wasn't part of our prep, so I appreciate that it happened naturally. So I just got back from Future Proof, and if for anybody who's been, they have these breakthrough meetings where a whole bunch of people can request to meet with one another, and you have these really fast discussions. And so I met with an advisor, and the advisor said, you're the tech guy. Tell me what I need. And I started to ask a few questions about his business, and none of them were related to tech. And I don't want to say he got frustrated. He didn't, but he was just sort of curious, like, well, why are you asking these questions? And I said, well, when you're meeting with clients, are you asking them questions that are outside of just their investment strategy? Are you asking them about some of their goals, where they're trying to go? What does retirement look like for them? Right? Because you want to understand the whole picture. Well, that's exactly what we're trying to do here. He started talking about a bunch of different tech demos he did. And then when I asked him a little bit more about his client base, this is a one-person shop, he started to tell me about the disparity in age across his clients, the types of services that he provides for his clients, the discrepancy in net worth across his clients. And so it didn't sound like there was any sort of overwhelming theme or plan. It was just taking on business, and I'm growing fast. And I said, well, we really need to understand what success looks like for you, right? Before we can self assess, right, and properly figure out what we need to solve for, we need to understand what success looks like for you. So we spent a little time talking about, what does a growing firm for you look like? What does work-life balance look like? He said he wanted to spend lots of time with family, etc. So we talked through some of that. And then I sent him home with some homework. And the homework was, now that we've talked about what you want the firm to look like, I want you to do some self-assessment. Let's think about that version of the firm, and what are some of the areas that we're going to need to solve for. And so putting this into a 30-day action plan for anybody on this webinar, think about your firm, where you're going, and take some time. We don't want to, derail you from your tech selection, but take a little time to think about, What are the actual gaps that will move your business forward? Not just busy work, but what are the actual pain points that are preventing your business from servicing clients the way you want, deepening those relationships, growing AUM, getting a greater share of greater wallet share? What are those things? Let's figure out what our actual gaps are that we want to solve for, and then let's maybe start to prioritize them. And then that gets us into our success metrics. So what does it look like if we actually solve for them? What's kind of the next problem that we'll see once we kind of solve for these initial ones? And so we can start to prioritize and figure out what we really need to focus on. And that may come down to certain feature sets or certain technology types, but ultimately you have to know where you're going. And I think that's been a theme of this webinar. Um, and then the last piece I would say is you really need to know when you can do this yourself and when you should get some outside assistance. I always recommend outside assistance, but that's very self-serving. But I do think advisors are good at advising their clients. And unless they've gone through dozens of technology selections in the past, this is not your area of expertise. Just like you expect your clients to come to you for financial advice and helping them with their retirement goals, we hope you come to someone like myself, Cameo, or the Visory team to help you with your goals.
Very well said. That would almost be a picture perfect close to the webinar, James. That's awesome.
But we have more.
But
We
wait,
do.
there's more. We're gonna jump into Cameo. I know you had a lot to say about the costs of missteps and inaction. So we've talked a lot about what we're doing in action, but what happens when you don't move forward or you're paralyzed by the choice fatigue. I think we need to go one more slide up.
Yeah, this is such a big area that I see with advisors, really the cost of missteps and inaction. And if you think about it, I really categorize it into four different areas. So there's client attrition and lost referrals because you don't have a designated process to handle that. Underperformance from staff and team members, inefficiency in tech workflows, which is the basis of our conversation today, and then really delayed growth and capacity constraints. And so when you think about the loss of client referrals, right, or client attrition because you don't have a consistent client experience, or clients slip through the cracks because the follow-up wasn't organized, or long response times that make clients feel ignored or unimportant. And a quick story that I have with a new client that I'm working with, a $3 million engagement. The client was really happy to be working with this advisor, but their new client account onboarding stalled out, and it stalled out for about 5 weeks. And the new client was livid around why is this not moving forward? That was a $3 million engagement. So at 1%, it's $30,000 because the client onboarding process wasn't communicated to the team effectively. So these costs can add up over time, and you really want to think about how are you leveraging not only your teams to move your onboarding process through, but your technology. Have you built out your tools to its highest and best use? Are you using workflows that actually work for you and make sense? Because when you don't set up the tools in the right way, then you can create these opportunities where you missteps, right? And those missteps are significantly expensive. Additionally, if you're not thinking about the security of your particular tools and overlooking that, you can expose your firm to higher risk, compliance issues, and then overall the cost of inaction when you don't take the time to actually build out your tech suite the way that you needed to. When you delay implementation, that can erode ROI over time. One of the biggest things that I see in particular with growing RIAs that have teams is the teams haven't really been trained to use the technology the way that it needs to. So there's loss in productivity, there's loss in efficiency, and over time that begins to compound. We haven't even talked about eroding client trust. These missteps that are happening over time in your organization creates a situation that I've seen where clients are like, okay, have I picked the right firm? And they start to question, should I stay? And we talk about right? And attrition. This is one of the biggest things. And so, as James mentioned before, really think about what overall success looks like in your firm so that you can get these missteps mitigated and not have to worry about these particular areas.
I'd love to add just on the cost of inaction. I think all of these and everything Cameo said is spot on, but the cost of inaction is probably the one that I think like I encounter the most often. I find that teams are very often waiting for some sort of perfect time where, the moon and the stars align and no one's taking vacation, budgets have been approved, um, nobody in the office is going on any sort of, paternity or maternity leave. There's no competing projects, and there's absolutely no chance the SEC is going to come in and do an audit. They wait for this sort of like perfect time, and it doesn't come. And the reality is, while they're doing that, there is so much lost in just waiting to find some quick wins, some things you can do that would actually free up more time to let you focus on these larger initiatives. So if you do work with somebody or even if you're doing this on your own, I would tell you that you should look to find a way to get some quick wins now and get moving on your technology roadmap immediately because the longer you wait, the more it's going to cost you.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Incredible points. To me, a good metaphor is like, oh, I don't want to empty the dishwasher because it'll take me so much time. But in the meantime, I have all of my dirty dishes piled in the sink that could really benefit from just being put in an empty dishwasher. So, the cost of inaction is making me think I need to go empty my dishwasher right
I'm a
now.
drive-by dishwasher emptier. So
Oh,
like anytime I go to the kitchen for something, I'll like grab and put a few things away. I'm kind of the same way with laundry. I hate doing laundry and dishes. So it's like I'll fold a few things in the dryer and I don't leave it all for once to do it at once. And I find that works for me. So
that is actually kind of genius. We'll have to take that offline, James. I have some questions. So guys, you'll see this slide is a Visory offered vendor assessment worksheet. This is free. This is no strings attached because we truly want you guys to be safe as well. Take a screenshot or a picture of that QR code. It'll get you that a vendor assessment worksheet to give to people like your CRMs and things that we've been talking about today.
and everybody's
Should
getting
I,
the slide deck, right?
I, I think so. There's the
Yeah.
recording for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Cameo, do
You
you have any closing thoughts?
I do. One thing I want to share with everyone who's listening and who may catch the recording is if you don't have all the answers, that's okay. You have experts that are here on the screen in this presentation. You can reach out to us and we can get your questions answered. And we want to support you getting some quick wins that James just shared. And for those of you who are looking to get better workflows and leverage AI, get some efficiencies kind of as a starting place, you can opt into this AI and workflows e-course that I created because we really want to help you get the right tools and things in place so you can experience those quick wins, which allows for even greater momentum as you continue to move your firm forward.
Cameo, I'm sure all of our ears just perked up at the word AI. I think this is a very incredible e-course that you've got created here. I know that's something on the top of everyone's mind right now.
How did we make it this far without talking about AI?
I know,
I
right?
know, right?
You almost made it through a whole webinar, everybody, without hearing about AI, but
Exactly.
now everybody's ears probably perked up.
And just to confirm, a copy of the recording is sent to all of the registrants who joined us today. All right, James, final thoughts.
Yeah, I really like what Cameo just said. It made me think, for those who know Michael Kitts is, he just gave a presentation at Future Proof. And while there were a host of different things that stood out, the one that resonates with me because of what Cameo just said is if if you don't know what you're doing quite yet, like, don't worry, you're in good company. He showed a slide with technology satisfaction. And while it was on a 1 to 10 scale, and while there were a good number of votes for satisfaction with 7, 8, 9, the tail of 1 through 6 was quite long and large on that graph. So the takeaway is a lot of people are not really happy with their technology stack and how it's working for them. So you're in good company. Along those lines, if you're looking for different tech, please sign up for Wealth Tech Select. It's completely free. For RIAs, it is a giant directory. We have over 1,000 different technology and service providers that you can search through with categories and things like that. If you want to get in touch with us to get some assistance, or you want to get in touch with some of the vendors, we enable that all directly through the platform. RIA Ascent is another platform that's coming out soon. A little more practice management plus personalized tech and service provider recommendations. Would love to get you to check out our website and sign up for our waiting list.
Awesome. You've been a great wealth of knowledge, James. Thanks so much for joining. And Cameo,
Thanks
you
for
you
having me.
both are a dangerous duo. I love it.
Thank
Um,
you so much for having us.
Of course, I'll give my 2 cents here at the end. Grab your free vendor assessment worksheet through this QR code as well. Email us, visoryria@visory.net if you have any questions and if you need anybody to help manage your cybersecurity. You keep having to yell at that one advisor who's got their password written on a sticky note right on their desk. Reach out to myself. I'd be happy to talk to you about how Visory can make your life a little bit more simple. So, thank you all so much for joining us today. If you have any questions and you want to throw them in the chat or stick around, feel free to. But as discussed, James, Cameo, myself, and Tammy are always available to help with anything else that pops up. Thank you guys.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Awesome. Rock on. I don't see anything coming in, so we're good to end.
All right.
Okay.
Take care.
Thanks for
Wow.
having us.